Hi, and welcome to a special edition of Top of the Morning. I'm Jacqueline Massaro, and we're here at the National Women's Hall of Fame celebration of the 40th anniversary of Title IX. Stay tuned for more. Welcome back. We're about to listen to some very inspirational women speak.
All of these events, as all of you know, take a lot of work, coordination, and support to make it happen. And we are so pleased, first of all, to thank our corporate sponsors who helped us so much in getting this done and getting this started very, very quickly. So I'm going to share with you, you'll have your program, I'm going to share with you the names of our corporate sponsors, and I hope you'll be able to thank them with your applause when I finish. We have a founding sponsor, ITT. They have been a support of ours for many years. They reside in Seneca Falls, and they've helped us keep the hall and helped us build the hall and do all the kinds of things that ITT has so generously done. We also want to thank Gallup for providing this wonderful space and all of the support that they're providing today. And we thank Gallup for welcoming us so nicely and so generously to Washington, D.C. Northrop Grumman Corporation has been a supporter of not only our induction, but they're supporting this event, and I thank them as well. Our bronze sponsors, corporate sponsors, the University Space Research Association, Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America, our champions, Corning Incorporated, Edison International, Lifetime, Progress Energy, Visa, the Corning Museum of Glass provided these beautiful awards that we will be giving tonight. So we thank them. We'd like to thank our patrons, AAUW, Acumen Scientific, Intrinsic, and also our supporters. The President's Council on Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition, thank you so much. The U.S. Soccer Foundation, PBS Makers, and I think you've seen some of their videos in the reception area, and Good Makers. So if you would join me in a round of applause. What we call our leaders and patrons. Those are individuals. There are board members, there are supporters, there are friends who come to our events who support our events around the country. So their names are in our program, and I hope you take the time to note that, and thank you as well. I also want to thank our board members. If you'd raise your hands real quickly, they're around the room, and I want to thank you for all the work. And finally, I'm going to call out 2 of our board members because they have made this happen in Washington, D.C., and that's Kate Beal and Ellen Riddleberger. McGuire, our program, well, we call our showrunner, who's also helped to make this happen. And so I just want to, and all the other volunteers who so generously stepped up. And one more thing. One thing about the National Women's Hall of Fame is we honor pioneers, we induct great women. And these great women are first throughout history. They're historical and they're contemporary. And they are first in the areas of arts, business, education, science, humanities, athletics, government, and philanthropy. Many of them, several of them are here tonight, and I'm going to ask you if you can quickly stand as I call you. You know many of them here in Washington and around the country. Dr. Allie Latimer. Dr. Judy Pfeiffer, who is also a board member. We all know that Donna DiVerona, Catherine Switzer, Ruth Colvin, who came from Syracuse, Linda Alvarado from Denver, Day, who joins us from Washington, D.C. Thank you. And these women are nominated by the public. They're nominated by you. They're selected by judges. A judging panel. We're having our next induction in 2013. And go on greatwomen.org to see their profiles and also to see more about what we will be doing. And so with that, I want to also, there's one more person, and this is a future. Her name is Heidi Alexander. We had an award about somebody who is today leading for the future and what she would do. And she won, and she basically has proposed to do a mentorship for ice hockey, women who play ice hockey in Boston. So she's got some friends here from Joanne will know about her and meet her. And also I know we'll be hearing great things from her in the future. So we are now starting, I think, the second part of our program, and we're so excited to have so many people with us. First of all, we all remember the beautiful images of Michelle Kwan floating over the ice, I think, on our TV sets, and some people saw her in person. It's nice to know that she's a Californian and that she is here tonight representing the President's Council on Fitness, Nutrition, and Sports. She competed, as we all know, at a very high level for over a decade and is the most decorated figure skater in U.S. history. And she is known for her consistency, expressive artistry on ice, and is widely considered one of the greatest figure skaters of all time. So for well over a decade, she maintained her status not only as a popular figure skater, but also a popular female athlete. She consistently makes the top 10 on many polls and lists often as the only figure skater after so many years that she stopped competing. She is a public diplomacy ambassador under Secretary Condoleezza Rice. She served, and she travels the world on behalf of the United States. And I think one of the things to remark about that is these are women who have made great strides in their fields of specialty, and they carry on. They carry on for themselves. They carry on to serve. And it's my great, great pleasure to welcome and introduce Michelle Kwan.
So much for your kind introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to be joining all of you in celebrating this momentous occasion, Title IX 40th anniversary. I want to first thank Beverly and Gallup and also the National Women's Hall of Fame for hosting this wonderful event. I am truly honored to be a part of it. As a public diplomacy envoy and as a member of the President's Council on Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition, I've had the opportunity to promote the benefits of sports, what you learn from sports, to a generation of girls that are probably too young to know that it was only 40 years ago that some girls were not allowed to play and participate in sports. But all that have changed since the passage of Title IX, and the positive results since its inception have truly been staggering. Since 1972, the number of females competing in college athletics have increased 6 times, and the number of females participating in high school athletics have increased 10 times. Now, if you do the number, that's 300,000 to an increase in 3 million girls participating in sports. But it's not just in sports. The spirit of Title IX, of equal opportunity for women, spreads through all aspects of our society. Since Title IX, we've seen the proportion of female professors in both mathematics and in sciences double. So Title IX is working. As many of you know, it's one thing to adopt a law. It's quite another to recognize its significance, to embrace it, to support it, moving forward. So when it comes to Title IX, have done just that. So as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of Title IX, I'd just like to congratulate all the women and men here tonight who have made it a point to incorporate the essence of Title IX into the home, into the workplace, and into your lives. Through your efforts, you have helped make America a better place and pave the way for the next generation. I've had many role models growing up, but none more important than the keynote speaker for tonight's celebration. I'm honored and nervous to introduce someone that I've looked up to for many years, Dr. Condoleezza Rice. Secretary Rice appointed me as the first public diplomacy envoy in 2006, and since then she's continued to be so significant in my life as I studied at Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy and as I pursue a career in public service. Among her many accomplishments and achievements, Dr. Rice served as the 66th Secretary of State for President George W. Bush, the second woman and first African-American woman to hold the post as Secretary of State. Prior to that, she served as National Security Advisor for President Bush, the first woman to hold that position. Dr. Rice is currently a professor of political economy in the Graduate School of Business at Stanford University, the Thomas and Barbara Stevenson Senior Fellow on Public Policy at the Hoover Institution, and a professor of political science at Stanford. She's also a partner of Rice Hadley Gates. But on a personal note, I can tell you that Dr. Rice and I share 2 common hobbies, and 2 passions, figure skating and golf. We're both former ice skaters, and we're both current golfers. I might have an edge on the triple Lutz, but for short game, she has me way behind. And of course, we share an alma mater, the University of Denver. Secretary Rice is someone who truly exemplifies the incredible achievements made by women, and since Title IX, and who has had a great impact on the history of our nation. Please help me welcome my friend and mentor, Dr. Condoleezza Rice.
is wonderful to be here at the Gallup building, the Gallup organization, and thank you for letting us be in this wonderful space. I obviously am very honored to be with you on this momentous occasion celebrating the 40th anniversary of Title IX. I'd like to thank my good friend Bev Ryder and the Women's Hall of Fame, the National Women's Hall of Fame for this event. It's great to see Senator Barbara Mikulski, not just a real pioneer, but really the definition of a public servant with integrity and dedication to our nation. And so I'm delighted to share this day with you. To the inductees to the National Women's Hall of Fame, I am very gratified by the wonderful achievements that are being recognized here. And I couldn't have a nicer introduction than from Michelle Kwan, who I admire as a figure skater first and foremost. She said something about a triple Lutz. Let's just say I never got even close to a triple Lutz. In fact, I have to tell you a little funny story about Michelle and myself. We were at a dinner, and Michelle said, "So, how long has it been since you were on the ice?" Well, I didn't want to say a long time, so I said, "Well, Michelle, the problem is that somehow my skates didn't make it with me to Washington, D.C. when I moved." And she said, "Oh, so when did you get your skates?" And I was about to say 1974 and realized they were quite a bit older than Michelle. It was one of those moments. But Michelle not only served as a wonderful sports ambassador, public diplomacy ambassador for me when I was Secretary of State, continues to serve in those roles, but she also holds a master's degree in international politics from the Fletcher School of Law. What can I say about Title IX? It has transformed our country in so many important ways. We celebrate very often what it has done for women in sports, and that is in many ways the most dramatic. I can tell you that my own experience was a pre-Title IX experience. I finished college in 1974, and I will never forget joining the women's gym team after I stopped figure skating and having to have a bake sale so that we could go to the regional championships in Utah. Thank goodness those days are behind women's sports. And indeed, as I watch young women play together at the highest levels, to go to Final Fours, to play in the WNBA, to do things that were unthinkable when I was in college, we see the dramatic impact that Title IX has had in equalizing opportunities for women to play sports. It, of course, was not just about sports, Title IX. It was about equality in education. And we sometimes forget that when we think about what is done. But as Michelle started to talk about some statistics, do you realize that in 1970, only 8% of women had a college degree or higher? In 2009, that's 28%. In 1972, law and medicine, the year that I was a sophomore in college, law and medicine, only 7% of the degrees granted were to women. But in 2010, 47% to women. And so it's had a dramatic impact on the educational institutions and on women's education as well. But most importantly, it's had a dramatic impact on how women see themselves in the world, in the workplace, in our country. By playing sports, by being given opportunities that they richly deserve in educational institutions, you see the growing confidence of young women. I see it in the classroom. I saw it in the State Department, and that's really what's going to pay off. The sense that women belong any place they want to be. And that is the So Title IX has had a wonderful impact on women. It's had a wonderful impact on our institutions. It is noteworthy, for instance, that we see more and more women as CEOs. We see more and more women as university presidents. We see that 3 of the last 4 secretaries of state have been women. indeed, when Hillary finishes her term, it will have been 16 years since we had a white male Secretary of State. And so women are making progress. But if there is anything that we know about human progress, it is that it is not by accident. It may seem inevitable in retrospect, but of course it wasn't inevitable. It was because there were dedicated and patient patriots who were determined that women would have rights and opportunities. And when we have an anniversary, like the 40th anniversary of Title IX, it gives us a chance to celebrate what they brought. It gives us a chance to celebrate their dedication and their spirit. It gives us a chance to remember the hard knocks that they endured so that we might be able to have a celebration like this. But it also challenges us never to forget that hard-won gains are never, ever to be taken for granted. Things can roll backwards. Things can refuse to continue to progress. And so at any anniversary, it is awfully important not just to look back, but to look forward and to say, what do we still have to do? And we still have a lot to do. This anniversary also calls for me one other important fact to mind. The United States of America, because it is the greatest multi-ethnic democracy on the face of the earth, the greatest multi-ethnic democracy ever known to humankind, is very often a kind of beacon, a kind of bellwether for people of what human history ought to look like and how it ought to unfold. And so others look too to see how we think about and how we treat women. And in so many places around the world, women are still not just not equal. They are barely considered to be human. And so as we celebrate our great achievements under Title IX, as we look back to thank those who brought us here and look forward with the dedication to keep moving forward, I hope too that we will remember that there are corners of the world where something like Title IX hasn't even been conceived of yet. And we have an obligation to those women as well. You see, if there's one thing that I could do, one magic wand that I could wave, it would be to empower women. Because the empowerment of women is not just about the empowerment of women. If you want to do something about population explosion, empower women, and they won't have 10 kids and they won't have their first at 14. If you want to do something about human trafficking, empower women and they won't end up in the brothels of Southeast Asia or Eastern Europe, or for that matter, the United States. If you want to do something about poverty in a village, empower a woman with a little microloan, and she will employ a whole village. If you want to do something about the treatment of women in war, where very often rape is not a consequence of war, but actually a weapon of war, empower women, and they will speak with loud voices to protect themselves in our great international bodies. If you want to have better societies, more just societies, more democratic societies, more prosperous societies, empower women. Because when women are treated badly in a society, it is a proxy for something else. Something else is wrong. It's a society that doesn't value human life. It's a society that is dangerous. And so the empowerment of women is a much more powerful tool than just what it does for women. And oh, by the way, if you empower women, you'll empower your sons as well. those sons too will defend the rights of women. And so Title IX has had a wonderful transforming effect on our country, and we see its results here. But the spirit of Title IX has much more work to do at home and abroad. And as we celebrate this anniversary, let's keep that in mind, and let's pledge to make the world not as it is for women, but as it should be. Thank you very much.
I have to tell you a little story. Condi and I had dinner at my alma mater, Stanford, and we were talking about the 40th anniversary of Title IX. And she did a great job. She helped form the platform for this evening. She talked about the academic side of it. She talked about the athletic side of it. And then she said, why don't you get all three of them secretaries of state together? So we tried. You saw Madeleine Albright in the first segment. We just heard from Condi, and now we'll hear a few words from Hillary Clinton.
I'd like to thank the board members, staff, and volunteers who have kept the mission of the Hall alive by bringing to life the stories of groundbreaking women. I also want to thank one of my predecessors, Dr. Condoleezza Rice, a pioneer in her own right and a champion for women's progress. So many of us remember the doors that were closed to us before Title IX. Women were denied access to playing fields, science labs, even classrooms. Now, because of the inspiring work of three people, Birch Bayh, Bernice Sandler, and the late Patsy Mink, and countless women and men who have come since, women and girls are legally protected against discrimination in education and schools. It may be a simple piece of legislation, but it sure has helped level the playing field around the country. I don't think there has ever been a better time in our history to be a woman, but there's a lot of work still to be done. The fight for equality, both here and abroad, will take all of us working together. And we must continue to bend that arc of history so that our daughters and generations to come have even more opportunities. Congratulations on 40 years of opening doors and expanding opportunity.
As the Dean of the Women in the Senate, she has been serving as a mentor to other women senators when they first took office. She builds coalitions. She proves that Senate women are not solo acts, but work together to get things done. She is a trailblazer. Her first election was a successful run for Baltimore City Council in 1971, and she, as of March 17, 2012, has become the longest serving woman in the history of the United States Congress. And I always take her mantra with me, that when in the face of adversity, you square your shoulders, you stand up straight, and you put on your lipstick.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to thank the Women's Hall of Fame for hosting this wonderful event to commemorate Title IX and also to honor those who were the prime movers of Title IX. It's a great event, and hopefully it raises money for the Women's Hall of Fame. I encourage every single one of you, if you haven't been up to Seneca Falls, to see where it all happened, where it all got started, where that first group of women squared their shoulders, put their lipsticks on, and gave them hell and started a new American Revolution. You want to go up to Seneca Falls, and you're glad that you're here supporting this event tonight. It's just wonderful to share the stage and the podium with Michelle Kwan, who thrilled and excited so many of us as she took to the ice, particularly for the Olympics. You know, Michelle, I don't think you realize, first of all, I'm not a skater. I spent a good part of my life being on thin ice, but I'm not a skater. Rice got her skates just about the time I won my first election. But Michelle, when you went out on that ice and you took the hopes and dreams of yourself and all the work that you had put in to being a champion skater, you knew you were taking the hopes and dreams of your country, representing us there. But also what you were doing was taking the hearts of little girls all over America who wanted to get out there, to give it their personal best, to give it a try, to give it a go. And we want to thank you for the inspirational leadership that you have provided so many. Rice's considerable achievements, her compelling personal narrative, and the fact that as she represented the United States of America, she really too took the hopes and dreams of the United States of America as she traveled and was the United States of America in so many places. And as you hear tonight, as she speaks, she spoke not only for herself, and she also spoke not only for the United States of America, but she spoke for women who have no voice, who have no chance of speaking up, who, if they did speak up, would land in jail, land in prison, land behind a despicable situation. And Dr. Rice, we want to thank you for not only representing America, which you've done so ably and so well, but really being a voice for those who have none, and continually remind us we are our brothers and we are our sisters' keeper. Thank you. Terrific that we have this event tonight. We are days and weeks away from the London Olympics. We're going to see a lot of big splash. We're going to be cheering the teams on. And all of this, particularly as our Americans are at the opening ceremony, we're going to say, wasn't it always like this? Well, not quite. I remember 1972. 1972, we had no woman on the Supreme Court. We also had very few women on basketball courts. Many women still played, as women of my generation, half-court basketball. We were considered too dainty. Too dainty to play full-court, full-time basketball. Also in 1972, women were not included in the National Institute of Health protocols or trials. And we're sure many of us were not included in the Olympic trials. We also thought that the battles had been won. It was 1972. Get a life, girlfriends. I mean, didn't we solve all of those civil rights issues in 1968? Didn't the Congress in 1968 pass the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act? Wow, we all know how that's worked out. Of Lyndon Johnson, we passed the great Civil Rights Act to open up doors. And then, of course, the profound and significant Voting Rights Act of 1968. Those were the three most significant civil rights acts. So people felt that the battle had been won. But we all know that first laws passed doesn't mean guaranteed opportunity. And then what we now know was that when a young woman named Bernie Sandler from my own home state of Maryland, then a doctoral student at the University of Maryland, was denied a faculty position at the school, they said, hey, you come on too strong for a woman. We don't know if you're going to quite fit in. Gee, we don't know about you. She was heartbroken. She saw her dreams shattered. All of that hard work. You know what it's like to go get a PhD. And it was that denial that sent her on the way. And in 1970, Dr. Sandler sat in a congressional hearing about women's rights being held on the subcommittee on higher education. She was mesmerized. This led her to go to work with the charismatic and talented Congresswoman Patsy Mink. Patsy Mink took hold of these issues began an early draft of Title IX, having Dr. Standler at her side. And then over in the Senate, a man by the name of Senator Birch Bayh introduced also legislation that would add yet another new title called Title IX. Well, like they say, the rest is history. Those people put their lives on the line, listened to the stories of people in their day-to-day lives, and they changed the law books, they changed history, and they changed the personal history of so many women. And we want to give them a shout. Talked about the legislation, and as she indicated, it was about sports, but it was also one of the most important legislations advancing opportunities for women and girls in the world of education. At first in sports alone, where some were able to play varsity, few were able to go on to college. There were very few varsity sports for girls. We were cheerleaders. We were meant to carry the buckets and the batons and go hoorah, hoorah for the guys. But there was no bench, and in fact, we were expected to stay on the back bench. But after Title IX, we now know that the numbers and statistics have grown not only on the playing fields, but everywhere. Women who play sports get better grades. They graduate at higher rates. They often have less likely to have unwanted pregnancies. And they carry what they learn on those playing fields and are more confident and more self-esteem. Title IX has opened doors in all of these aspects. We now have a whole generation of women who not only have benefited from this law, but have broken through ceilings we never before imagined. So much has changed since 1972, when many of those girls walked on those playing fields, as those of us who worked in and walked on other fields. We are no longer seen as novelties. Often for those of us who were the first, we were viewed as the novelties. But now, what are we viewed as? We're viewed as scholars. We're viewed as physicians. We're viewed as scientists. We're viewed as champions in every field of endeavor. There are many here tonight, like Catherine Switzer, who ran the first marathon, and we were inducted in the Women's Hall of Fame. Our beloved Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman on the Supreme Court. For me, I was the first Democratic woman ever elected in her own right. A few months ago, when I took my oath for my 5th term, I became the longest serving woman in the history of the United States Senate, joining Margaret Chase Smith in the history books. And tonight I bring you the greetings of the women of the Senate. I told them I was coming over here, and all 17 of them wanted to say hello and bring their personal greetings, and also say every day they're trying to do their personal best to lead the country. One of the things when we were inducted in the Hall of Fame, Catherine and I talked to many other inductees, and there were 3 things that we had in common. And let me conclude by sharing these 3 things. One of the first things was, though we were in many instances the first, we all wanted to be the first of many. And we saw it as our obligation, as our responsibility, as that a door opened up for us. We wanted to make sure that a door opened for others, and to encourage and mentor other people to come into our fields of endeavor. The other thing was that often our greatest no that we heard became our greatest yes. Now, you can't do that. But who ever heard of a girl doing that? No woman could ever run for Baltimore City Council, did she? But why are we even thinking that? With that word no in our ears, but we turned it to yes in our hearts. Our biggest no became our greatest yes. And that's one of the other things that we need to continually tell those who hear no too often, that yes, you can. And then last but not at all least, that behind every me, there's a whole lot of we. You never get to be a me without the we. First of all, the public institutions, public schools, public libraries, public recreation centers, public playing fields, that enabled you to come no matter what's your background, what's your zip code, or the size of your family wallet. And then also, all of those young girls out there, it was the parents who drove them to practice, it was the teachers, it was the coaches. Behind every one of those champions, there's a whole lot of we. And we have to remember that in this country, even when you succeed with your own grit, determination, and talent, behind you is a whole lot of we. And we got to keep the we happening and growing. So we salute Title IX, and we salute the people who made it happen. And you, Senator Bayh, if I might say, you've been a great inspiration to many in the Senate. When your own beloved wife died of breast cancer, you took that cause up as well. And you were one of the first to speak about that dreaded disease and how we needed to increase research. You really began the race for the cure in the Senate. For all of those everywhere, too, who took that personal tragedy, we want to salute you. And to show that men of quality never fear we women who seek equality.
So impressive. We have such a distinguished panel sitting here, distinguished members, and I think we've learned from so many of them and watched them and achieve. And I want to welcome House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi from my home state, Southern California. As we all know, Congresswoman Pelosi is the Democratic leader of the U.S. House of Representatives with 112 Congress. And her mission and his focus is on strengthening America's middle class and creating jobs. From 2007 to 2011, she served as Speaker of the House, and we all know that she was the first woman elected to that position. Under her leadership, the 111th Congress was heralded as one of the most productive Congresses in history by congressional scholar Norman Ornstein. President Barack Obama stated that Speaker Pelosi is an extraordinary leader for the American people, and the Christian Science Monitor wrote, "Make no mistake, Nancy Pelosi is the most powerful woman in American politics and the most powerful House Speaker since Sam Rayburn a half century ago." So, it is without, I don't need to say more. I am so delighted to welcome Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi.
It's so wonderful to be here on this distinguished, I guess we're a panel, Secretary Rice and Senator Mikulski. I had the privilege just a short while ago to host in the Capitol a reception honoring Senator Mikulski for being the longest serving woman in the United States Congress, and as she said, the first woman elected to the Senate in her own right, not following the footsteps of anyone. Just about longevity, it's about the quality of her service and leadership in the Congress. We take some pride that she served some time in the House, but also in the Senate. And I associate myself with her comments and those of Secretary Rice when we talk about the challenges that face the world and our country, but the world, that almost every answer when you say increased empowerment of women, more involvement of women's leadership, whether it's the growth of our economy, whether it's the security of our military, whether it's the education of our children and lifetime learning, whether it's health care, whatever the subject, it is better served by much more participation of women in leadership roles. I went to the same high school Barbara Mikulski did, and I too played half-court basketball. And for Patsy Mink, it became a symbol of discrimination that she was bound to fight. Senator Bayh, it's an honor always to be with you. I had the privilege of speaking at the Indiana Democratic Party Jefferson-Jackson dinner about a month ago. And when I talked about you and the fact that we would be gathered here in just a few short weeks to commemorate and celebrate the anniversary of Title IX and talked about your leadership role, it was the most exciting response from your friends in Indiana. So I've had the privilege of talking about you in Indiana and Patsy Mink in Hawaii. And I would like to take a moment, being a House member, to spend a moment on Patsy Mink. Our daughter Wendy is here. Where's Wendy? Wendy, right there. Hi, Wendy, right in front of my very eye. Wendy knows how much members of the House revered Patsy Mink. Patsy Mink was a person who never took no for an answer. So the fact is, if you wanted to save time, you just said yes right from the start. And that is what the Speaker of the House at that time learned when Patsy decided that she was going to pass the Title IX language in the House of Representatives. It was tough times in the House. I mean, when I went 25 years ago, I'm celebrating my 25th anniversary now in June, this June, but when I came, there were like 24, maybe 24 women in the House. Barbara, when you went there, even fewer. And so when, and it wasn't that long, much before, but then when Patsy was there, even fewer. So she had to sell to this practically all-male body that it was important for Title IX language to be included in the bill. It was tough because, you know, as you know, it's Donna DeVerone, I see Donna, that coming over year in and year out, we had to fight the fight to continue to keep it all intact because everybody thought it was a zero-sum game. If women were getting more, then men must be getting less. That wasn't the point. Our country was getting a tremendous benefit. So anyway, Patsy Mink, let me just give you this example. I think it's important that you know Patsy because she's a beautiful, great person. So brilliant. The first in many ways. The first Asian American woman to practice law in Hawaii. I think the first woman, Asian American woman to go to the University of Michigan Law School. Chicago University, a new one of the top law schools in the country. Everything, the first. So one day she said to me, somebody's opposing me in the primary, and I need you to come to Hawaii to speak for me at my dinner. Oh, well, when is it, Patsy? It's such and such a date. That's when it has to be. It's that date. So I said, well, that's really too bad because I have my neighborhood meetings in San Francisco, and I fly from San Francisco, Washington on Friday, have my neighborhood meetings on Saturday and Sunday. So I really can't go. She said, well, what time are you meeting? I said, well, they go like 9 to 12 each day. She said, well, good. You can be on the 1 o'clock to go to Hawaii. You can speak at the event, and then you get off. You get to go back to the airport, take the red eye. You'll be back in time for your meetings on Saturday, Sunday. Just as an example. Of course, I went. I said, what's for that? Well, she all stretched us all to our limits, and that was just a modest example of how. But she never took no for an answer, and that is what the Speaker of the House learned at that time. It's a very tough vote. Could have come down to one vote. I know, Wendy, will you be telling about what happened the night? No, okay. Well, in any event, a personal intervention that maybe she wouldn't be able to be on the floor the day of the vote, and that could have sunk the whole ship, but she got the Speaker not only to say we bring it up once, but more than once, so that in fact it could be, the House could fulfill its obligation to women. And whether it has been said, it's not just about sports, it's about education and opportunity. And of course, Senator Bayh's leadership, Senator Mikulski mentioned Marvella, as she was such a wonderful, lovely lady. In my understanding, I didn't know this until tonight, earlier today, Marvella told him, we can't afford to ignore the development of 53% of the brain power in our country. So I know that she was a wonderful inspiration to you, and you had your own, shall we say, mobilization at home on this subject to urge you on. But this is all about mobilization on the outside, and Dr. Sandler, you did so much in that regard, and that is really what is important to know. Something this big, something this transformative for our country can happen with this, the personalities a Senator Bai, respected in every way throughout our country, so highly recognized to take on this cause, and Patsy Mink in the House of Representatives. But all the inside maneuvering in the world doesn't get you a success unless you have a public sentiment with you. President Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. And Dr. Sandler, thank you for that word. Over here, I was looking for you on that one. Thank you so much, Bernice, for your leadership on the outside to make all of this possible. Yeah, that's quite a statement. You didn't get the job because you came on too strong as a woman. Thank you for coming on too strong as a woman. You had made. It's important to know Patsy Mink was a woman of color, and as part of her legacy, of course, this legislation, she was always proud to have been part of it, but part of that legacy has to be the increased participation of many more minority women in every aspect of our lives. She was a leader way ahead of many of us in that regard. And one reason she told me I had to come because she was supporting me for leadership, but would be eventually a speakership. But she said, I have to make sure, my people have to see that we have women in the leadership and that is respected in Congress. And therefore, I need you to talk to my folks about that. And it is, it's just a remarkable thing. Senator Mikulski is quite correct. You have to go to Seneca Falls just to see what is there. The museum is so fabulous, all of it. But it is really important to note that the Hall of Fame, it has so many women that we're also proud of and know their work and introduced to others. But when you go to the home, for example, of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, which some of the suffragettes gathered there, she cooked and had all these children in rest, and she could hear down below from her home the domestic violence that was going on in some of those homes. She could hear it. She lived on the knoll, but she could hear it. And that was one of the motivators for her. And that was one of the motivations, right, Barbara, for the formation of the Women's Caucus, Violence Against Women internationally. And certainly that is one of the unifying in a bipartisan way for us. And we are still fighting some of that fight. But imagine the courage of those women at that time to leave home. They weren't even allowed to leave home alone, really, to leave home, travel the country, and to do so in a way that was so effective that we benefit from. So 90 years ago, over 90 years ago, the women's right to vote. Hallelujah, what a great thing, long overdue for our country. During World War II, the increased participation in the workforce. And wasn't that a fabulous thing that women helped win the war? Higher education of women throughout the 50s and after that in a much broader way. And then women in the professions, or women secretaries of state, the rest of it, and sky's the limit. But one of the missing links along the way for the unleashing of the full power of women that I hope that the spirit of Title IX will help us carry is to have quality, affordable child care for America's working families. It's never done, and it's really important for us to be able, for women, again, for their power, for their intellect, for our power, for our intellect and the rest, to be unleashed in a way that is healthy for all of our families. So I hope that some of the same mobilization and some of the same intellect and the rest that has gone on sustaining Title IX since we were blessed by the leadership of Senator Bai and Congresswoman Mink, some of that same enthusiasm will take us to this next stage, which I do think is a missing link. It's really important. I say to women, know your power. The Senator said something about the unique contribution that women have, each of us has to make. I had the privilege of serving as the first woman Speaker of the House. You know why? Because there were so many more women in the House who supported such an idea. Now, we're going to have a woman president one of these days soon, I just know. But one of the giant steps down that path to that place was the passage of Title IX. Thank you, Senator Byer, for your House and in the Senate, and on the House, just speaking to the House, and I just spoke to some of the Republican women on my way over here. We all send you our very best regards and many good wishes for much, much future success. As I always say when it comes to women, more power to us. Thank you all.
And I think as we conclude this evening, we want to do something very special from the hall in a tribute to thanks for our pioneers, Senator Birch Bayh, Representative Patsy Mink, and Dr. Bernice Sanders. And I'm going to call them up one by one. And Senator Bayh would come up here. Yeah. Thank you. We'd like to present you with this special award that symbolizes your leadership and your pioneering spirit in passing and helping pass Title IX. So please accept that with the gratitude of the National Women's Hall of Fame, with the gratitude of all women in the world.
Never let it be said that Birch Bayh was speechless. But it's very close. Thank you very much for this recognition. I want to give credit to the strong women in my life. To my 75-year-old grandmother, who said, "John, if the boy wants tomatoes, he's going to have tomatoes." Yes, Kate. And my wonderful wife, Marvella, who did say, "Birch, you can't ignore the brain power of 3% of the American people." And to my wife, Kitty, who gave me an advanced degree in what it's like to be a professional woman in a man's world. Without these pillars of strength, I don't think Birch Bayh would have had the wisdom to do what I had the good fortune to do. Thank you so much for that wonderful award and for all your thoughtfulness.
And I'd like to now call up Wendy Mink. And Wendy, we present you with this award of appreciation from the National Women's Hall of Fame for the work and the pioneering work that your mother did in passing and helping pass Title IX. Thank you so much.
My mother was part of a groundswell for women's equality that arose in the late 1960s. Millions of women produced that groundswell, which gave rise to policy innovations like Title IX. As a Congress member, my mother played a role in translating women's voices for equality into laws empowering individual women to claim equality at school and at work for themselves. Making her way from high school to Congress, my mother surmounted huge discriminatory barricades against women's full participation in American society, turned away from every medical school that she applied to, one of only 2 women in her law school class at the University of Chicago, turned away from every law firm that she applied to for a job, one of only 11 women in the U.S. House of Representatives when she was first elected in 1964. In 1970, when my mother introduced her first bill to secure equality for women, the Women's Equal Rights Bill, she did so to bring an end to the discriminatory practices with which she was so familiar. She was in the front lines of legislative struggles for women's equality because she was determined to make the world a fairer place for my generation of women and for the next generation and for the generation after that. My mother was fiercely proud to have played a role in winning and securing Title IX. But she was even more proud to witness the difference that Title IX actually made as it enabled millions of girls and women to assert equality and to demand fairness. On my mother's behalf, I thank the National Women's Hall of Fame for this award, for remembering and recognizing Patsy Mink as part of Title IX history. Thank you.
And if Dr. Bernice Sandler would come and join me. I know you are known as the godmother of Title IX. And so I want, on the in commemoration and on appreciation for the National Women's Hall of Fame, we'd like to present you with this award of appreciation for women of the National Women's Hall of Fame and for all women, United States women, for doing what you've done for Title IX. So I'll give this to you.
First, I want to tell you, when they said I came on too strong for a woman, this was 40 years ago. I was much more demure and smiling and sweet and lovely, but I was still too strong for a woman. I also want to say that what I didn't mention before, simply because I forgot, that you don't do anything like this alone. That there were hundreds of women on campuses at the beginning who risked their jobs to find information about discrimination and send it to me so we could file charges against their institution. Some of them did lose their jobs. Some of them never got tenure. Some of them never got a raise. Some of them even went on welfare. So it was not an easy struggle. A lot of people worked on it. I've been very visible, but they were invisible. And I just want to honor those women tonight because the award is not only for me, but for them as well. I also had such a good time doing a lot of this, even though it was often frustrating. But I worked with people like Senator Burt Fine and Representative Patsy Mink, and boy, did they teach me a lot. They had no idea how naive and inexperienced I was at the time. I would also say that I was so naive that I thought in 1 year we would solve everything after Title IX. People would simply say, you were discriminating, and they would say, oh, I'm so sorry. I won't do that anymore. And then I raised my estimate to 2 years, and then to 5 years. And finally have realized that we are part of a very, very long movement and revolution in social history, because we are really changing the very basis of human relations. And that does take a bit longer than ending discrimination. Thank you all very, very much.
This concludes our evening. We thank all of you for coming, and we thank you for participating in the panel. And I think we got a great glimpse, not only of the history of what all of us have lived through and what the future brings for us. I think that we are so pleased to have had Senator Bayh, Dr. Sandler, and Wendell and Mink of Patsy, and learning about what Patsy Mink had done, and everybody that was here tonight. So I appreciate everybody being here. I want to thank you. We look forward to being in Washington today. And I'm sorry. Oh, yes, I know. My board members were telling me to remind you that we have a silent action out here, and there are some great things, so we will keep that open for another 15 minutes or so. So I hope that you'll have a chance to basically join in the reception for a few more minutes. And again, we hope to see you next year. Thank you. When my African-American Olympic teammates, after winning gold like Wilma Rudolph, found themselves riding in the back of the bus because of the color of their skin. These were my experiences as a 1960 and 64 Olympian coming home from the gathering place of the Olympic movement, where there's no color and the international language is obscured. When women were denied access to most Ivy League schools, much less acceptance into law, business, engineering, and medical school. When images of successful, strong women were almost non-existent. This man, who listened to his wife and parented his successor, his son, in the U.S. Senate, gave us all hope again that something was indeed right in Washington. Senator Birch Bayh served in the Senate from 1962 to 81. He is known in our world as the grandfather of Title IX for his co-sponsorship, his attention to detail of hammering out a law that has simply changed the American culture. Truth is, even after Senator Bayh left office, his devotion to this landmark legislation never wavered. I recall meetings with him in crowded rooms across the country during the Bush administration's Opportunity in Athletics Commission deliberation, helping out to advise us on how to keep this law intact. This was in 2002. And he's still here with us today. May I introduce the one and only Senator Birch Bayh.
It's pretty hard to follow that guy that was just on the screen a while ago. I hope what I say isn't inconsistent with what he said. When I was out on the walk outside of the building here, I had a fellow come up to me and said, "Didn't you used to be Birch Bayh?" I'm not sure how you answered that question. I think I said, yes, and I still am. And that's why I'm here. And it's a privilege to be here with you. "41 years ago today, we were holding hearings in the Senate Judiciary Committee. I, as the chairman of the Constitutional Amendments Subcommittee, was presiding, and we were taking testimony for the Equal Rights Amendment, which, as you know, would amend the Constitution and provide equality across the board for women. Our lead-off witness was a wonderful congresswoman from Brooklyn, by the name of Shirley Chisholm. I wanted her to go first. She sat there and she looked at that all-white veil panel, and she said, "Gentlemen, you know I've been discriminated against because I am black. But I'm here to tell you that it is nothing compared to the discrimination against me because I'm a woman." Wow. If that didn't speak volumes. It certainly inspired me to try to do what I never thought I'd ever be involved in. I grew up on a farm in western Indiana. Grandmother Aunt Kate had just as loud a say as Uncle John, my granddad. In fact, I remember a personal story, if I may interject it here to show you how this really works. The Campbell Soup people wanted to put down they had a factory, they wanted to get the farmers to grow tomatoes. So they came to my granddad, who was one of the leading farmers out there in our township, and asked him if he'd go to Matus. Well, I was sort of standing aside. Nobody knew I was at the top of the stairs when this conversation took place. My granddad said, well, thank you very much for thinking about me. That's a privilege. But I've been successful growing corn and soybeans, little hay, cattle, and hogs. I'm too old to start something new. I hope you understand. They left and I was heartbroken because they had said, why can't you use this as a 4-H project for young birds? They left, my heart went back down where it belonged. And I heard the phone conversation. If I get sort of sentimental about this, it's because I'm a very sentimental guy and this is a very sentimental subject. So here goes. The next words I heard were, John, the boy wants tomatoes, and he's going to have tomatoes. Yes, Kate. Between my senior year in high school, I had 6 acres of tomatoes. I had to do everything, be responsible for everything from the planting to the picking to bringing the checks in and to paying the bills. But at a very tender age. And my granddad wondered what in the world I was doing, pouring all that fertilizer down until he saw the checks coming in, and then he said, maybe this isn't bad after all. Thank you so much for all that you've done to recognize me. I think Title IX speaks volumes, and I think the real credit that Senator Bennett would attest to goes not to the guy that put together those 37 words, but the girls and young women and not so young women that make those 37 words come to life.
Have asked who's going to pick up the baton on Title IX and all our sports issues. Where is that person? Well, that person has just walked in the door from Colorado. Hope the fires are under control, Senator Bennett. He has 3 daughters and was a superintendent of schools. He is committed to the Olympic movement and Title IX. Would you please come up and say a few words, Senator Bennett?
Well, thank you. Since he won't say it, I will say it. You may have noticed that things have gone downhill in the Senate since Birch Bayh left. And we would take him back any time, although he has too much sense. Tried to send his son there for a while, but now we've lost him as well. And things have not been great recently. This has even been detected by my daughters, and it's because of the 3 of them that I'm here today, not here in this room, but really in the Senate itself. Many of the choices I've made along the way have been because of them. So I try to involve them in the work. And last spring break, the oldest one, who's now 12, got to go to Harry Potter World. And the other 2, who are now 11 and 7, were sent to spend the week with their father in Washington, D.C. You can imagine how excited they were about that. But I was tremendously excited about it because they don't have a chance to really see what I do during the week. And so the first day they were with me, I made a terrible mistake, which was to make them go to every single meeting that I had. They went on strike the rest of the week. But one of those meetings was in Harry Reid's very fancy conference room in the United States Capitol with chandeliers and tiles and mosaics and views of the mall. Many of you in this room have been in that room, I'm sure. And we were getting a briefing on China. 40 minutes into the meeting, Dick Durbin pokes me in the ribs like this and points to the absolute other corner of the room where my then 6-year-old daughter, Anne, was standing with a handmade sign, I am bored. B-O-A-R-D, which as her former superintendent cut me too quick. But I think the little Ann captures very well the feeling of the American people these days about the conversation that we're having in Washington. And it is therefore why I am so happy to be here to say to Birch Bayh what an inspiration he is to all of us that want to get back to a time when we are actually passing legislation in this place that is increasing rather than diminishing opportunity for people all across the United States. It's because of your inspiration and all of the work of all of the people in this room, stretching back that 40 and 41 years, that it would never occur to my three little girls that they have equal access to anything when it comes to education. In fact, what we're seeing among children living in poverty is that our girls are doing better than our boys, which is a real problem for everybody when it comes to K-12, in the sense that we're not getting the job done for people in this country today. Today, if you're born into poverty, only 9 of 100 kids can expect to graduate with a college degree, which means that 91 out of 100 of our kids are constrained to the margin of the economy, the margin of the democracy, from the very beginning, if we don't change the way we deliver education to our children in this country. And I have seen that it's possible to do it. I've seen it in the highest performing middle school in Denver, Colorado, which is an all-girls public school that's called GALS, Girls Athletic Leadership School. I can tell you it would never occur to the women that go to that school that they actually don't have more opportunity than the boys that are their peers that are more traditional schools. And we need to summon the courage and summon the strength to say it's time for us to change that model. Just as Birch Bayh and the people that worked with him in the early 70s said, it's time to change the model. And we know that it can make a huge difference. And the reason we know that is because of the example that you set. And the difference that women in this country have, the difference in opportunity they have, than they had 40 years ago. 50% of college graduates, as was said in the video, are women. 50% of doctors, women. 50% of lawyers, women. But even with all of those outcomes, we shouldn't imagine that our work is done. The United States is not doing close to what we need to do to deliver our own engineers and our own mathematicians out of our pipeline. And that is a place where women are terribly underrepresented in fields that are going to become the most significant fields in the 21st century. So there is no question that access to athletics has made a huge difference. There's no question that in some fields of academic endeavor we have come so far that it would have seemed unbelievable to the people that you were working with in the early 70s, and we should celebrate that success. But I can't think of a way to celebrate that success that would be more significant than to recommit ourselves to do the work that's going to bring this all the way home. So I want to thank you for everything that you're already doing, and thank you for redoubling your efforts to make sure that we continue on this path to opportunity until there's true opportunity for everybody in this society, no matter where they came from. Thanks so much for that.
I often wonder what our country would look like today, yes, if Patsy Mink, Edith Green, Bernie Sandler, Birch Bayh had not been so dedicated and so passionate. They led in a perfect storm of activism. Because their ideas were the right thing to do, because America needed a wake-up call, others joined in. Bipartisanship, which the senator just mentioned, on Title IX issue was required. While Birch led from the Democratic side, Alaskan Senator Ted Stevens, a co-sponsor of Title IX, stepped up and over the years, with every single challenge, and there were many, resolutely defended a law he was proud to be part of. His longevity and powerful leadership kept many in his party in line. One of my last lunches with him took place in the Senate dining room during the Bush administration's Opportunity in Athletics Title IX deliberations. It so happened that on this very day, the Secretary of Education, Rod Page, was in the room. Concerned that Page was bowing to pressure to weaken Title IX compliance, the senator invited the secretary to meet his luncheon's guests. I was one. The other was Morocco's Nawal El Moutawakil, a Title IX recipient. Training in the United States had given her the fine-tuning she needed to become the first African and Muslim to capture an Olympic gold medal. I think you heard about the fact that Saudi Arabia is sending Olympians to London for the very first time. Her education in the United States and her winning ways helped her transcend years of prejudice because of Title IX. She's on the executive board of the International Olympic Committee and is one of those women internationally making a huge difference in the Olympic movement. Page greeted us, and then the senator reached under the table and pulled out his favorite baseball cap and gave it to Page. On front, in bold letters, was the caption, Title IX. The photo taken that day spoke volumes about the Republican senator who, for those of us who knew him, became known as the guardian of Title IX. Who, do you ask, made sure he took the baseball cap to lunch? His wife, Catherine Stevens. A lawyer, we are grateful for this bipartisan effort, and Catherine is here today. Catherine, would you please stand? And now it's my joy to try to manage an incredible panel of women who've led this charge, history in the making in front of you. We are so frustrated that everyone is going to have to keep to time because there's so many stories to tell. So each one of these individuals has taken a role, and they're going to talk about their role in the Title IX battle. But first I want, would all the Title IX recipients, either through scholarships in education or in sport, please stand up so we can take a look at you? Are they in the room?
Wow, wasn't that just amazing? Some very moving women and some very inspirational speeches. That was a great event, especially for a young woman trying to pursue a career in the medical sciences. Title IX is very important to me, and it should be for all of you. So remember, keep voting. I'm Jacqueline Massaro, and this is Top of the Morning. Tune in next time.